My uncle left me his entire multi-million-dollar estate because I was the only one who truly cared for him. Now, my estranged family, drowning in secret debt, is swarming like vultures. They demanded I bail them out, so I set a trap that would expose their greed forever. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The betrayal didn't start with the reading of the will. It started the moment I walked into the funeral home and realized that for my mother and brother, this wasn't a memorial. It was a networking event. I stood near the back of the viewing room, clutching a damp tissue that had long since disintegrated in my sweating palm. My head was pounding, a rhythmic, dull throb behind my eyes that made the overly perfumed scent of lilies feel suffocating. I had been up for 3 days straight, finalizing the arrangements that they couldn't be bothered to make, and the exhaustion had settled deep in my bones, making me feel fragile, like one of the crumbling spines of the antique books I restored for a living. "Elizabeth, stop slouching. You look like you're the one in the casket," a sharp voice hissed in my ear. I didn't need to turn around to know it was Karen, my mother. She didn't like being called Mom, she said it aged her. She swept past me, her black dress tailored to perfection, not a single hair out of place. She looked less like a grieving sister-in-law and more like a CEO arriving for a hostile takeover. She didn't touch my arm, didn't offer a hug. She simply critiqued my posture and moved on to the buffet table to inspect the shrimp. "He looks peaceful, doesn't he?" I jumped slightly. It was Jason, my younger brother. He was wearing a suit that I knew cost more than my car, but looking closely, I noticed the collar was slightly frayed and his eyes were bloodshot. He smelled of expensive cologne and stale scotch. "He looks dead, Jason," I whispered, my voice raspy. "He's gone." Right, Jason said, tapping his foot nervously against the plush carpet. He wasn't looking at Uncle Silas's casket. He was looking at the guests, scanning the room. "Look, did the lawyer, Mr. Sterling, was it? Did he say anything to you about the timeline?" "The timeline?" I asked, looking at him. "We haven't even buried him yet." I know, it's just." Jason lowered his voice, a sheen of sweat visible on his upper lip despite the aggressive air conditioning. "Liquidity is tight right now. The market, you know. And Silas was sitting on that massive property portfolio. Mom says the estate is worth 8 figures easily. If we can liquidate the downtown commercial lots quickly, we're golden." I felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with my lack of sleep. "Is that all this is to you? Liquidation?" Jason rolled his eyes, a gesture I had seen 1,000 times growing up, usually right before I was told I was being too sensitive or too different to understand how the real world worked. "Don't start with the moral superiority, Lizzie. We're family. Family looks out for each other. And Silas? Well, he didn't exactly use the money, did he? He lived like a hermit. It's better off in the hands of people who can actually build a legacy." I looked over at the casket. Uncle Silas, the man who had taught me how to fish, how to appreciate the smell of old paper, how to sit in silence without feeling lonely. The man who had come to my college graduation when my parents were too busy with a charity gala. "He had a legacy," I said quietly. Sure, books and dust," Jason scoffed, checking his watch. "Anyway, Sterling said the reading is at the house in an hour. Don't be late. Mom wants to get a table at Le Bernardin afterwards to celebrate. To decompress." An hour later, I sat in the library of Uncle Silas's sprawling Victorian mansion. The room smelled of cedar and pipe tobacco, a scent that usually brought me comfort, but today it felt heavy. I sat in the corner, in a wingback chair that swallowed my small frame. Karen and Jason sat together on the leather sofa, looking like royalty holding court. Karen was already mentally redecorating. "We'll tear out these shelves," she whispered loudly to Jason. "Open concept. This room is a dungeon. We can flip this place for $3 million if we stage it right." Mr. Sterling entered the room. He was a man of few words, with steel-gray hair and wire-rimmed glasses that hid eyes that missed nothing. He carried a thick manila envelope. He didn't look at Karen or Jason. He looked directly at me, gave a nearly imperceptible nod, and sat behind Silas's massive oak desk. "Thank you for coming," Sterling said, his voice dry as parchment. "Let's get on with it, shall we?" Karen said, crossing her legs. "We have reservations." Sterling paused. He had Jews. Ted his glasses. He opened the folder slowly, savoring the sound of the paper tearing. "Silas was a man of particular values," Sterling began, reading from the preamble. "He valued loyalty. He valued presence. He valued those who sought his company, not his checkbook." Jason shifted uncomfortably. Karen tapped her manicure against the leather armrest. "To my sister-in-law, Karen," Sterling read. Karen straightened up, a predatory smile forming. "I leave the sum of $1, Sterling read, his voice flat. The silence in the room was absolute. It was a vacuum, sucking the air out of the space. "Excuse me," Karen laughed, a high-pitched, brittle sound. "That's a typo, a joke." "And to my nephew, Jason," Sterling continued, ignoring her. "I leave the sum of $1. "What the hell is this?" Jason stood up, his face turning a blotchy red. "That old bat was senile. We'll contest it." "Sit down, Mr. Harrison," Sterling commanded. The authority in his voice snapped Jason back into his seat. The medical evaluations of Silas's mental state were updated weekly until the day of his death. He was of sound mind. Sterling turned the page. He looked at me again. This time, his expression softened. "To my niece, Elizabeth, who never asked for a penny, and who was the only one to visit me for the last 15 years without an agenda, I leave the remainder of my estate. The properties, the investment portfolios, the liquid assets, and this house. Everything." The room spun. I gripped the arms of the chair. "Everything," I whispered. "Everything," Sterling confirmed. "Estimated value after taxes, roughly $22 million. The scream that came out of my mother's mouth wasn't human. It was the sound of a carefully constructed facade shattering into a million pieces. But as I looked at their horrified, angry faces, I realized the money wasn't a gift. It was a magnifying glass, and what it was about to reveal about my family was uglier than I could have ever imagined. The betrayal of them, ignoring me for years, was painful, but seeing the hatred in their eyes, the moment I became the owner of what they coveted, that was worse than the diagnosis itself. The drive back to my apartment was a blur of red taillights and rain streaking across the windshield. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, not from the cold, but from the adrenaline crash. I had stayed behind with Mr. Sterling for another hour after Karen and Jason had stormed out, spewing threats of lawsuits and elder abuse. Sterling had been kind but grave. "They will come for you, Elizabeth," he had warned me, handing me a heavy binder of documents. "Silas knew this would happen. He prepared for it, but you need to be ready. Do not sign anything, do not agree to anything, and do not trust them." I parked my 10-year-old sedan in the carport of my modest apartment complex. It was a stark contrast to the mansion I now owned, but this place was mine. I had paid for every inch of my life with money earned from restoring history, one page at a time. I unlocked my door and collapsed onto my beige sofa, tossing my keys on the coffee table. My phone, which I had silenced during the meeting, began to buzz against the wood. Buzz, buzz, buzz. I stared at it. 34 missed calls, 12 text messages. I picked it up, my stomach churning. "Mom, Elizabeth, pick up. We need to talk. We were emotional. We didn't mean it. Mom, don't let that lawyer brainwash you. We are your family. Jason, Lizzie, come on, pick up. I'm in trouble. Real trouble. Jason, you can't keep all that. It's not right. Think about Dad. Mom, I'm coming over." I dropped the phone like it was hot coal. She was coming over. Karen hadn't visited my apartment in the 6 years I'd lived here. She called it quaint in a tone that meant pathetic. 20 minutes later, a sharp, authoritative knock rattled my door. I debated not answering. I wanted to crawl into bed and sleep for a week, but I knew Karen. She would stand there and knock until the neighbors called the police. I took a deep breath, smoothed down my wrinkled black dress, and opened the door. Karen stood there, holding a covered casserole dish. She had changed out of her funeral black into a soft, cream-colored cashmere sweater and slacks. Her makeup had been touched up, the anger erased and replaced with a mask of maternal concern that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Elizabeth, darling," she cooed, breezing past me into the apartment without an invitation. "I brought you lasagna. I know you forget to eat when you're emotional." She set the dish on my cluttered dining table, pushing aside a stack of invoices and a jar of bookbinding glue. She looked around the small living room, her nose wrinkling slightly at the worn rug, but she forced a smile. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I asked, staying by the door. I didn't close it all the way. "I'm checking on my daughter," she said, turning to face me. She clasped her hands. In front of her, "Look, today was hard for everyone. We all handled it poorly. Jason is, well, you know Jason, he's passionate, and I was just in shock. Silas was always so unpredictable." "He wasn't unpredictable," I said, my voice steady despite my shaking knees. "He was consistent, you just never paid attention." Karen's eye twitched, just a fraction. "Well, that's in the past. We're here now, and we need to discuss the future. Specifically, the management of the assets." She walked over to me, reaching out to brush a stray hair from my forehead. I flinched, pulling away. Her hand hovered in the air, then dropped. "Elizabeth, be reasonable," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You restore books, you live. Here, you don't know the first thing about managing a portfolio of that size. Capital gains tax, property management, liquidity ratios. It will eat you alive. Jason has experience. I have connections in real estate. We can help you. We can take the burden off your shoulders." "The burden," I repeated, "or the money?" "Don't be crass," she snapped, her mask slipping for a second before she pulled it back up. "We are talking about protecting the family legacy. Jason he's in a bit of a tight spot, Elizabeth. A temporary cash flow issue with his business. If he doesn't get a bridge loan by Friday, he could lose everything. His investors are dangerous people." "So that's it," I said, feeling a cold clarity wash over me. "He needs a bailout." "He needs his sister?" Karen pleaded, grabbing my hands now. Her grip was tight, bordering on painful. "He's your brother. We are all you have. You can't just sit on $20 million while your brother is ruined. Silas would never have wanted that." "Silas left the money to me," I said, pulling my hands away. "Not to Jason." "Because he was sick, he wasn't thinking clearly?" Karen's voice rose, the shrill edge returning. "Now, listen to me. Mr. Sterling is a shark. He wants those fees. You need to fire him. Tomorrow. I have a new attorney lined up, a family friend. He will draft a transfer of assets into a family trust. We'll manage it, you'll get a generous monthly allowance, and everyone wins." I looked at her. I really looked at her. I saw the desperation behind the layers of foundation. I saw the fear. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the urge to please her. I felt powerful. Because I knew something she didn't. Mr. Sterling had shown me a specific clause in the will just before I left. A clause that Silas had called the vulture prevention protocol. It was a legal landmine, waiting for them to step on it. "I'm not signing anything, Mom," I said quietly, "and I'm not firing Mr. Sterling." Karen stared at me, her mouth a thin line. The warmth evaporated from the room instantly. "You are making a mistake, Elizabeth," she said, her voice ice cold. "A very big mistake. You think you're special because the old man liked you? You're just a tool he used to spite us. You'll come crawling back when the taxes hit and you're drowning, and when you do, don't expect us to be there." She grabbed her purse and marched to the door. She didn't look back. She didn't say goodbye. She just slammed the door so hard the walls shook. I stared at the lasagna on the table. It was store-bought. She hadn't even removed the sticker from the bottom. They thought they could bully me. They thought I was the same weak, desperate for approval girl I had been at 16. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. I had spent the last 15 years listening to Uncle Silas's stories about how he made his fortune. I knew how to play the long game. To understand why the betrayal cut so deep, you have to understand the history. I wasn't just the different one, I was the invisible one. Growing up, our house was a stage, and Karen was the director. Jason was the star, the captain of the football team, the prom king, the business major. I was the prop in the background. I preferred libraries to parties, vintage clothes to designer trends, and silence to the constant chatter of social climbing. When I was 19, I started visiting Uncle Sila's. He lived 2 towns over in the old Victorian district, a neighborhood my mother called rundown, but which Sila's called authentic. The first time I went, it was because I needed to interview a family member for a history project, and my parents were too busy golfing. I stayed for 6 hours. We drank Earl Grey tea out of chipped china cups and talked about the Roman Empire, the preservation of parchment, and the absurdity of modern consumerism. Sila's wasn't the crazy hermit my family described. He was brilliant. He was a retired venture capitalist who had made a fortune in the 80s and then walked away because he hated the artificiality of the corporate world. He saw through people. Your mother, he told me once years ago, sees people as mirrors. She only likes the if they reflect a flattering image of herself. You, Elizabeth, you're a window, you look out at the world. For 15 years, I visited him every Sunday. I brought him groceries, he taught me about investing. I drove him to his doctor's appointments, he taught me how to spot a liar. When his health declined, I was the one who hired the nurses, who managed his meds, who held his hand when the pain got bad. Karen and Jason, they sent a Christmas card. Once, it was a photo of just the 2 of them. Now, that history was being rewritten. 2 days after the funeral, I went to my workshop. It was a small, climate-controlled studio in the back of an antique store. The smell of glue and leather usually calmed me, but today I couldn't focus. The bell above the door chimed. I looked up, expecting a customer. It was Jason. He looked worse than he had at the funeral. He was wearing jeans and a hoodie, trying to look casual, but his eyes were darting around the room like a trapped animal. He hadn't shaved in a few days. Nice place, he said, picking up a 19th century Bible and flipping through it carelessly. Smells like old people. Put that down, Jason. The oils on your hands will damage the paper, I said, putting on my cotton gloves. What do you want? Direct, I like it, he said, putting the book down a little too hard. He leaned against my workbench, invading my personal space. Look, Lizzie, Mom came on too strong. You know how she is. She's panicking. She thinks you're going to run off to Tahiti and leave us here to rot. I have work to do, Jason. I need your help, he blurted out. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, terrifying desperation. I need $500,000 by Friday. I stopped working. $500,000? Jason, the estate is in probate. I can't touch a cent of the cash for months. You know that. You can get a loan against the assets, he said quickly, as if he had rehearsed it. Sterling can set it up, a personal line of credit. The mansion alone is collateral enough. Why do you need $500,000 by Friday? I asked, crossing my arms. Jason looked away. He ran a hand through his hair. I made some bad calls, crypto and some leverage trading. It went south, way south. And the people I borrowed the seed money from, they aren't banks, Lizzie. They don't send overdue notices. They send guys with baseball bats. He pulled up his sleeve. There was a dark, purple bruise on his forearm, shaped like fingerprints. They grabbed me yesterday, he whispered. They said next time it's my knees. I felt a pang of sympathy. It was instinctive, the sisterly protective reflex kicking in. But then I remembered the funeral. I remembered him joking about liquidation while Silas's body was in the room. Who are they, Jason? Just, guys, look, if you sign the loan papers, I can pay them off. Then I'll sell my condo, I'll get a job, I'll pay you back. I swear on my life. Please, Lizzie, I'm scared. He was crying now, actual tears. I have to talk to Mr. Sterling, I said, wavering. I can't just authorize that kind of money. No, Jason slammed his hand on the workbench, making my tools jump. The aggression was back in a flash. Sterling will say no, he hates us. You have to do this without him. You're the owner. You can fire him and hire someone who will do what you want. The sudden shift from tears to rage was jarring. It was manipulative. It was exactly what Silas had warned me about. He will use fear, Silas had told me, and if that doesn't work, he will use guilt. And if that doesn't work, he will use anger. I'm not firing Mr. Sterling, Jason, I said, my voice hardening. And I'm not taking out a loan against Silas's legacy to pay off your gambling debts. Jason stared at me. The fear in his eyes vanished, replaced by a cold, reptilian hate. He straightened up, wiping his face. You're going to regret this, he spat. You think you're so high and mighty with your books and your little gloves, but you don't know what you're stepping into. Mom and I, we aren't going to let you steal what's ours. It's not yours, Jason. It never was. We'll see about that, he sneered. Family is everything, right? You're about to find out exactly what that means. He turned and stormed out of the shop, kicking the door open. I stood there shaking. I took off my gloves. I reached for the phone and dialed Mr. Sterling. Mr. Sterling, I said when he answered. It's starting. Jason just left. Are you safe? Sterling asked immediately. Yes, but he's desperate. He needs $500,000 by Friday. Good, Sterling said. The word surprised me. Desperation makes them sloppy. Elizabeth, I need you to come to my office tomorrow. There is another part of the estate I haven't shown you yet. A box Silas left specifically for this situation. A box? He called it his insurance policy, Sterling said. I think it's time, yo. You opened it. The next morning, the sky was a bruised purple, heavy with the promise of a storm that refused to break. I drove to Mr. Sterling's office in the city, the wipers of my car rhythmically slapping away the mist. My mind was still replaying Jason's threat, family is everything. It sounded less like a motto and more like a warning shot. Mr. Sterling's office was in a pre-war building with marble floors and an elevator that smelled of brass polish. His secretary, a woman who looked like she had been guarding secrets since the Nixon administration, ushered me in immediately. Sterling was standing by the window, looking out at the gray skyline. On his desk sat a black metal box, battered and scratched, looking entirely out of place amidst the mahogany and leather. Coffee, Sterling offered, turning around. He looked tired. No, thank you. Is that the box? I asked, sitting down. I kept my coat on. A chill had settled into me that the building's heating couldn't touch. This, Sterling said, resting his hand on the metal lid, is what Silas called his Pandora's box. He instructed me to give this to you only if your family threatened you or the estate. Given Jason's visit to your shop yesterday, I believe the condition has been met. He slid a small key across the desk. It was an old iron key, heavy and cold. Elizabeth, Sterling said softly, what is inside will change how you see them. Forever. Are you sure you want to open it? They threatened me, Mr. Sterling. Jason is in debt to dangerous people. Karen is trying to manipulate me into signing over control. I need to know what I'm dealing with. I took the key. My hand trembled slightly as I inserted it into the lock. With a stiff clack, the latch gave way. I lifted the lid. Inside, there was no money, no gold, just stacks of papers, organized with the meticulous care of a man who had spent his life analyzing data. There were 3 thick folders, one labeled Karen, one labeled Jason, and one labeled the exit strategy. I reached for the folder labeled Karen first. Silas hired a forensic accountant 7 years ago, Sterling explained as I opened the file. He noticed some irregularities in your grandmother's accounts before she passed. He never acted on it because he didn't want to destroy your grandmother's final years with a scandal, but he kept the receipts. I flipped through the pages. Bank statements, wire transfers, withdrawals from a joint account Karen held with my grandmother. She was siphoning money, I whispered, the numbers blurring before my eyes. 5,000 here, 10,000 there. home repairs that never happened, medical expenses that were reimbursed by insurance. Over 4 years, she embezzled nearly $300,000 from her own mother, Sterling said, his voice void of emotion. She used it to fund her lifestyle, the lease on the Merceds, the country club membership. She was stealing from a woman with dementia to keep up appearances. I felt sick, physically sick. I remembered my grandmother wearing threadbare sweaters while Karen bought new designer handbags, complaining that care homes are so expensive. I closed the folder and reached for Jason. Jason's is more recent, Sterling noted. I opened it. It was a dossier of failed business ventures, lawsuits from partners he had defrauded, and then the gambling records. Online casinos, offshore accounts, and staggering losses. But the most damning document was a photocopy of a loan agreement from a private lender, a loan shark. He borrowed $200,000 against a property he doesn't own, I read, my voice shaking. He listed Silas's mansion as collateral, dated 3 months ago. That is fraud, Sterling said. He forged Silas's signature as a guarantor. The lenders are likely the ones pressuring him now. If they find out Silas is dead and Jason has no claim to the house, they will come for him. He needs you to bail him out not just to pay the debt, but to cover up the crime. I sat back, the weight of the revelation crushing me. They weren't just greedy. They were criminals, and they had been using Silas and my grandmother as their personal piggy banks for years. What is the third folder? I asked, pointing to the exit strategy. That, Sterling said, a small, grim smile touching his lips, is Silas's masterstroke. He knew they would try to contest the will. He knew they would try to guilt you. So he prepared a trap, a legal maneuver that uses their own greed against them. I opened the folder. It wasn't a dossier. It was a single legal document, drafted but unsigned, titled the Conditional Beneficiary Agreement. The strategy is simple, Sterling explained. You invite them to a meeting. You tell them you are willing to help, provided they sign a full disclosure of their financials to the estate, supposedly to assess their needs. Once they sign that disclosure, attesting that they have no hidden debts or illegal entanglements, you trigger the audit clause. It exposes the fraud, the forgery, and the embezzlement legally. It doesn't just cut them off, it hands the evidence directly to the authorities. I ran my fingers over the paper. It was brilliant. It was ruthless. It was exactly what Silas would do. They think I'm weak, I said, closing the box. They think I'm just a book restorer who hides in the back of a shop. Are you? Sterling asked. I stood up. I thought about the years of exclusion, the way Karen looked through me, the way Jason mocked me, the theft from my grandmother. No, I said, clutching the box to my chest. I fix broken things, Mr. Sterling, but some things are too rotten to be fixed. Sometimes you have to throw the book away. I didn't have to wait long for them to make their move. 2 days later, I was at Silas's mansion, meeting with a security company to have the locks changed. The house was vast and silent, the dust motes dancing in the afternoon sun that streamed through the high windows. I was in the library, running my hand along the spine of a first edition Dickens, when the front door banged open. Elizabeth. It was Karen. She hadn't rung the doorbell. She had used her spare key, a key I hadn't realized she possessed. I walked out into the grand foyer. Karen was there, flanked by Jason and a man I didn't recognize. He was short, sweating in a cheap suit and holding a briefcase. Mom, I said, stopping at the top of the marble staircase. I didn't invite you. This is my brother's house, Karen announced, her heels clicking loudly on the tile as she stepped further in. And until probate is settled, I have every right to be here. We need to talk. Now. Who is he? I asked, gesturing to the sweating man. This is Mr. Henderson, Jason said, stepping forward. He looked manic, his eyes darting around the foyer. He's a financial consultant. He's here to help us structure the trust. I didn't agree to a trust, I said, walking down the stairs slowly. I focused on keeping my breathing even. I had the knowledge of the box in my head. I knew exactly who they were now. Elizabeth, stop being difficult, Karen snapped. Mr. Henderson has drawn up some paperwork. It's a temporary measure. A power of attorney limited to the estate's liquid assets. Just so we can pay the bills, handle the funeral costs, and manage the investments before the market turns. The funeral costs are paid, I said, reaching the bottom of the stairs. I paid them yesterday. Karen faltered for a second, then waved her hand dismissively. That's not the point. The point is you are overwhelmed. We can see it. You look tired, darling. You aren't equipped for this level of wealth. Mr. Henderson can handle the transition. Jason and I will oversee it. You can go back to your little books. Mr. Henderson stepped forward, offering me a pen and a document. It's standard procedure, Ms. Elizabeth, just a formality to ensure asset protection. I took the document. I didn't read it. I looked at Jason. Is this about the loan sharks, Jason? I asked softly. The silence that followed was instant and heavy. Jason's face went white. Mr. Henderson froze. I don't know what you're talking about, Jason stammered, his laugh sounding like a bark. Loan sharks? Lizzie, you've been reading too many of those mystery novels. The $200,000, I continued, my voice gaining strength. Borrowed 3 months ago with a forged signature, guaranteed against this house. Karen whipped her head around to look at Jason. What is she talking about? She's lying, Jason screamed, his fists balling up. She's trying to cut us out. She's crazy. And you, Mother, I said, turning my gaze to her. Did you think Silas didn't know about Grandma's accounts? Karen's face went from indignant to slack-jawed shock. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving the rouge standing out like clown makeup. I took care of your grandmother, Karen whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and rage. I deserved that money. I was the one dealing with the doctors, the nurses. Silas was never there. You stole from a woman with dementia, I said, my voice cold. And Silas documented every cent. He left me the records, Mom, bank statements, signatures, everything. You little wretch, Karen hissed, stepping toward me. The mask was fully off now. Her face was twisted into a snarl. You think you can blackmail us with papers from a senile old man? It's not blackmail, I said calmly. It's leverage, and I'm not signing anything. I tore the power of attorney document in half. The sound was loud in the echoing foyer. Then I tore it again. And again. I let the pieces flutter to the floor like confetti. Get out, I said. You can't do this, Jason shouted, stepping toward me aggressively. I need that money. They're going to kill me, Elizabeth, do you hear me? They're going to kill me. Then you should have thought about that before you committed fraud, I said, not backing down. Get out of my house, or I call the police and show them the files right now. Jason looked at me, then at the shredded paper, then at his mother. He looked like he was about to strike me. But then, the security guard I had hired, a large, silent man named Miller, stepped out of the library shadow. Jason froze. We're leaving, Karen said, grabbing Jason's arm. Her eyes were burning holes into me. This isn't over, Elizabeth. You're playing a dangerous game. You have no idea who you're messing with. I think I do, I said. I'm messing with family. They retreated, dragging the confused Mr. Henderson with them. As the heavy oak door slammed shut, my knees finally gave out. I sat on the bottom step of the staircase, shaking uncontrollably. I had won the battle, but the war had just begun, and I knew desperation would make them do something drastic. The days following the confrontation were a masterclass in psychological warfare. It started small. My car tires were slashed outside my apartment. Then, a brick was thrown through the window of my antique shop with a note wrapped around it. Do the right thing. I knew it was Jason. He wasn't subtle, he was terrified. I moved into the mansion permanently. It was a fortress, gated, with a security system Silas had installed years ago that rivaled a bank's. I hired Miller, the security guard, to stay on the property 24/7. But while they tried to intimidate me, I was building the coffin. I spent my nights in Silas's study, cross-referencing the documents in the box with current public records. I found that Karen had listed her own house for sale, a desperate move to raise cash, likely to help Jason. But the title wasn't clean. There were liens against it she hadn't disclosed to the realtor. Mr. Sterling and I met daily. We were preparing the conditional beneficiary agreement. We needed it to be watertight. "They are running out of time," Sterling said one rainy Tuesday, reviewing a report from the private investigator we had hired to watch Jason. "Your brother met with two men in a parking garage last night. The interaction turned physical." He slid a grainy photo across the desk. It showed Jason being shoved against a concrete wall by a man in a leather jacket. Jason looked beaten, disheveled. "He will try something tonight," Sterling predicted. "He has no other choice." Sterling was right. At 2:00 a.m., the silent alarm in the mansion tripped. I was awake, sitting in the dark of the library, watching the security monitors. I saw a figure in a hoodie prying open the French doors on the east wing, the old solarium. He was clumsy, using a crowbar with frantic, jerky movements. It was Jason. I watched him on the screen. He wasn't coming for me. He was heading for the study. He was looking for the box. He thought if he destroyed the evidence, he would be safe. I picked up the phone to call the police, but then I stopped. If I had him arrested for breaking and entering, it would be a scandal. Karen would spin it. She would cry to the press that her cruel daughter had her grieving brother arrested for trying to retrieve a family heirloom. She would play the victim card she had perfected over decades. No, I needed something definitive. I needed a confession. I signaled Miller to wait. I watched Jason enter the study. I saw him tearing through the drawers, throwing papers on the floor. He was sobbing, muttering to himself. "Where is it? Where is it?" His voice came through the audio feed, tinny and distorted. He found the safe behind the painting. He tried a few combinations, birthdays likely. Nothing worked. He hit the safe with the crowbar, screaming in frustration. I picked up the intercom handset that connected to the study. "It's not in there, Jason," I said into the mic. On the screen, Jason jumped 3 feet in the air. He spun around, swinging the crowbar blindly. "Lizzie," he screamed at the empty room. "Where are you? Give it to me. Give me the files." "Why did you do it, Jason?" I asked, my voice echoing in the room where he stood. I hit the record button on the console. "Why did you forge Silas's signature?" "I had to," he yelled, addressing the ceiling. "I was down. I just needed a bridge loan. I was going to pay it back. I just needed time. You have to help me, Lizzie. They gave me until Friday. If I don't pay, they're going to break my hands. Please." "And Mom," I asked, "did she know?" "Of course she knew," Jason shouted. "She told me to do it. She said Silas was a vegetable that he'd never notice. She said it was our inheritance anyway." Click. I stopped the recording. "Go home, Jason," I said. "Miller is coming in 3 minutes to escort you off the property. If you're still there, the police get this recording." Jason stared at the camera lens, his face a mask of defeat. He dropped the crowbar. He looked small, broken, and pathetic. He ran. The next morning, I called Karen. "Bring Jason," I said. "Come to the house tonight. I'm ready to make a deal." "You are?" Karen's voice was cautious, but I could hear the relief flooding in. "Oh, Elizabeth, thank goodness. You're finally seeing reason. Family is everything after all." "Yes," I said, looking at the recording file on my computer screen. "Family is everything. Be here at 7:00 p.m. and bring your lawyer. We're going to settle this once and for all." I hung up. The trap was set. The evidence was irrefutable. Tonight, I wouldn't just be defending my inheritance. I would be exposing a lifetime of lies, and I was going to do it in front of the one audience Karen cared about most, the public. The deal I had proposed to Karen came with a condition, a formal dinner at the estate. I told her that if we were going to unify the family and announce the restructuring of Silas's assets, We should do it properly. I told her she could invite the important people, the board members of her charities, her real estate partners, the social elite she had spent her life trying to impress. She swallowed the bait whole. To Karen, a public audience wasn't a risk, it was a necessity. It was her victory lap. By 7:00 p.m., the driveway was lined with luxury sedans. The Great Hall, which had been silent and dusty just a week ago, was now alive with the hum of polite conversation and the clinking of crystal. I had hired a catering staff, a string quartet, and florists to fill the room with white orchids. It was beautiful. It was expensive. It was the perfect stage. I stood at the top of the staircase, watching them. Karen was in her element, wearing a shimmering silver gown, holding a glass of champagne, and holding court near the fireplace. Jason was there, too, looking cleaner but nervous. He kept checking his phone, his eyes darting to the windows, still terrified of the shadows. "Are you ready?" Mr. Sterling appeared beside me. He was wearing a tuxedo, looking less like a lawyer and more like an executioner. Behind him stood two men in plain suits who didn't look like party guests. "Yes," I said, smoothing down my simple black dress. "Let's finish this." I walked down the stairs. The conversation in the room lulled as the guests noticed me. Karen beamed, rushing over to take my arm, playing the role of the doting mother to perfection. "Here she is," Karen announced, her voice projecting to the back of the room. "The heiress herself. Elizabeth, darling, everyone is dying to hear your announcement. We were just talking about the new family foundation we're launching." "Yes," I said, stepping onto the small platform that had been set up for the musicians. "I do have an announcement." I tapped the microphone. The feedback squeal silenced the room completely. The string quartet stopped playing. 50 pairs of eyes fixed on me. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steady. "My mother insisted on this gathering. She said that family is everything, that in times of crisis we must come together, and she was right." Karen nodded vigorously, raising her glass to me. Jason offered a weak, forced smile. "Uncle Silas believed in legacy," I continued. "He believed that truth was the only currency that mattered, and for a long time the truth of this family has been hidden. Tonight, I want to honor Silas by bringing everything into the light." I signaled to the audio technician I had hired. He pressed a button on the console. Suddenly, Jason's voice boomed through the high-end speakers, filling the cavernous hall. It wasn't the polite murmur of the party. It was the desperate, terrified screaming from the night before. I was down, I just needed a bridge loan. They gave me until Friday. If I don't pay, they're going to break my hands." The color drained from Jason's face instantly. He dropped his glass, the sound of shattering crystal piercing the shocked silence of the room. Karen froze, her smile trapped in a grotesque rictus. The recording continued. My voice on the tape asked, "And Mom, did she know?" And then Jason's voice again, loud and clear, echoing off the marble walls. "Of course she knew. She told me to do it. She said Silas was a vegetable that he'd never notice. She said it was our inheritance anyway." The gasps from the guests were audible. People stepped back from Karen as if she were contagious. The socialites she had spent years grooming, the board members she tried to impress, they looked at her with pure, unadulterated disgust. "Turn it off," Karen shrieked, lunging toward the sound system. "It's a lie, it's a fake. She manipulated the audio." "It is not a fake," I said into the microphone, my voice cutting through her panic. "And neither are the bank records I have handed over to the district attorney regarding the theft of my grandmother's savings." At that cue, the side doors opened. The two men in plain suits stepped forward, followed by two uniformed officers. They weren't here for the champagne. They walked straight to Jason. "Jason Harrison," one of the officers asked. Jason didn't run. He looked at the officers, then at the terrified crowd, and finally at me. And in that moment, I saw something shift in him. The fear of the loan sharks, the men who would break his hands, was replaced by a strange resignation. I had just destroyed his life, but I had also saved him. In jail, the sharks couldn't reach him. "I'm him," Jason whispered. He held out his hands. As the handcuffs clicked, the room erupted into chaos. But I wasn't done. "And Karen Harrison," the other officer said, turning to my mother. "We have a warrant for your arrest regarding elder abuse and embezzlement." Karen looked around the room, desperate for an ally. "This is a mistake. Judge Henderson, you know me. Martha, tell them, this is my daughter. She's mentally unstable. She's doing this to hurt me." But no one stepped forward. The crowd parted, leaving her isolated in the center of the room she thought she commanded. The shame was absolute. The woman who lived for appearances was being stripped of her dignity in front of the very people whose validation she craved. "You ungrateful little." Karen lunged at me, her face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. Miller, my security guard, stepped in front of me, blocking her path easily. The officer grabbed her arm. She screamed, kicking and thrashing as they dragged her toward the door. Her silver heels scraped against the marble floor, a sound I would remember for the rest of my life. I stood on the platform, watching them go. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with the scent of expensive perfume and the debris of a shattered family. I looked at the crowd. "Please enjoy the food, the show is over." I walked off the stage, past the stunned guests, and out the back door into the cool night air. I sat on the stone steps of the terrace, looking out at the dark gardens. My hands were shaking, but for the first time in 15 years, I didn't feel heavy. I felt light. Mr. Sterling sat down next to me. He didn't say a word. He just handed me a handkerchief. "It's done," I whispered. "Yes," Sterling said, looking at the moon. "Silas would have enjoyed that." The fallout was swift and brutal. With the evidence Silas had compiled and the confession I had recorded, the legal case was a slam dunk. Karen's assets, what little she actually had left after years of living beyond her means, were frozen. The friends she had invited to the dinner gave statements to the press, distancing themselves from her as fast as possible. She became a pariah, the socialite scammer on the front page of the local papers. Jason pled guilty. It was the first honest thing he had done in his adult life. 3 weeks after the dinner, I went to visit him at the county detention center. We sat on opposite sides of a thick glass partition. He looked different. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by a gray jumpsuit. His hair was unstyled, but he looked rested. The manic energy was gone. "You saved me," he said quietly, not looking me in the eye. "I put you in prison, Jason." "Yeah," he let out a short, dry laugh. "But the guys I owed money to, they don't have reach in here, and Sterling told me you paid off the principal debt. You didn't have to do that." "I didn't do it for you," I lied. "I did it so they wouldn't come burn down my house." Jason finally looked up. His eyes were wet. "I'm sorry, Lizzie, about everything. Mom, she always made it seem like it was us against the world, but it was just her against everyone. I should have stood up for you." "You can stand up for yourself now," I said. "Sterling says you'll do 18 months. Use the time. Read something other than a betting slip. When you get out, if you're clean, and I mean actually clean, come see me. I might have some books that need binding. It's hard work, but it's honest." He nodded, a tear slipping down his cheek. He placed his hand on the glass. I hesitated, then placed my hand against his. For a moment, we weren't the heiress and the felon. We were just two kids who had survived the same war. "Goodbye, Jason." I walked out of the prison and into the bright sunlight. Mr. Sterling was waiting by the car. "Ready to go home?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. "I have one more stop." We drove to the cemetery. It was a quiet day, the wind rustling the leaves of the oak trees. I walked to Uncle Silas's grave. The stone was simple, just his name and dates. I placed a first edition copy of Great Expectations on the grass. It was a book we had read together years ago. "You were right," I said to the stone. "You said the money would reveal who they were, but you didn't tell me it would reveal who I was." I had thought I was weak. I had thought I was just the quiet niece who liked old things, but I had found a spine of steel. Beneath the cardigan, I had protected his legacy, I had protected myself. I'm going to turn the estate into a foundation, I told him. A grant program for historians and archivists, people who preserve the truth. We're going to keep the past safe, Silas. I stood there for a long time, listening to the wind. I didn't feel alone. That evening, I returned to the mansion. I walked into the library and turned on the lamps. The room glowed with warmth. I sat in Silas's wingback chair, my chair now, and picked up my tools. There was a 17th century map on the desk that needed restoring. The edges were frayed, the ink faded, the paper brittle. It was damaged, yes, but with patience, with care, and with a steady hand, it could be made whole again. Just like me.